Right now, somewhere in the world, a human embryo is growing a tail. Every single human embryo that has ever existed grows one, and that includes the one that eventually became you. If you reach around to the base of your spine right now, you can feel a hard little cluster of fused bone called the coccyx. That is your biological gravestone. It is the leftover anchor point of an appendage that natural selection forcefully amputated from your family tree. But if you ask the average person why humans lost their tails, they usually give you the same intuitive story. Millions of years ago, our ancestors climbed out of the trees, moved out onto the savanna, and started walking upright on two legs. A tail was just dead weight dragging in the dirt, so evolution got rid of it. But the fossil record proves it is completely wrong. Humans didn't lose their tails. We didn't evolve away from having one, and it had absolutely nothing to do with walking upright. To understand why you don't have a tail, we have to look at the actual timeline of human history. Walking on two legs is a relatively recent development in our lineage. One of the earliest known fossils that shows signs of upright walking is Sahelanthropus chadensis, which dates back roughly 6 to 7 million years. But the loss of the tail in our family tree happened 25 million years ago. That is a massive 18 million year gap. Tens of millions of years before anything resembling a human being ever decided to try walking on two legs, a distant ancestor we share with every ape on Earth, chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, was already completely tailless. We didn't lose our tails so we could walk. We were just born into a family that had already lost them. In fact, if you look at the primate family tree today, tail loss perfectly tracks with being an ape. Monkeys, for the most part, still have their tails. Apes do not. And almost none of those tailless apes are walking around on two legs. So, if we didn't lose our tails to walk on the ground, why did the shared ancestor of all apes lose its tail 25 million years ago? For decades, scientists had absolutely no idea, until 2024. In 2024, a team of geneticists finally found the smoking gun. They traced the entire disappearance of the ape tail down to a single tiny genetic accident. They started looking closely at a specific gene called TBXT. This is a famous piece of biological code that plays a massive role in building the spine and the tail in basically all vertebrate animals. When they compared the genomes of tailless apes to tailed monkeys, they found something incredibly strange hiding inside the ape DNA. It was a rogue snippet of mobile code called an ALU element. Think of ALU elements like tiny biological jumping beans. They are scattered by the millions throughout primate DNA, randomly copying and pasting themselves around your genome, usually doing absolutely nothing. That's why scientists ignored this one for so long. But 25 million years ago, one of these jumping genes landed in the exact wrong spot inside the TBXT gene. And worse, it landed right next to an older jumping gene that was facing backwards. When your cells go to read your DNA to build a body part, they have to splice the instructions together. But because these two jumping genes were sitting opposite each other, they stuck together like magnets. They literally folded a page of your biological instruction manual in half. When the cellular machinery tried to read the instructions to build a tail, it hit that fold and completely skipped a crucial step. It built a shorter, completely broken version of the protein. To prove this wasn't just a theory, the researchers actually engineered this exact same skipped page into the DNA of mice. The mice were born without tails. It was a direct, reproducible genetic kill switch. But the researchers found something genuinely uncomfortable hiding inside that mouse experiment. The mice that had this skipped genetic page didn't just lose their tails. Some of them also developed severe neural tube defects, malformations in the spinal cord that are identical to conditions like spina bifida in humans. This means the TBXT gene doesn't just build tails, it helps seal up the spinal cord during embryonic development. That single genetic typo that deleted the ape tail 25 million years ago came bundled with a terrifying biological cost. It increased the risk of severe birth defects. Evolution is a ruthless accountant. For a mutation this dangerous to stick around and spread to every single ape and human on Earth for 25 million years, the payoff had to be absolutely massive. The animals with this mutation had to be surviving significantly better than the animals without it. So, what was the payoff? Why was losing a tail so important that our ancestors accepted a deadly genetic trade-off? The physics of living in trees. Monkeys and apes move through the jungle canopy in fundamentally different ways. For a monkey running on all fours on top of a tree branch, a tail is a literal lifesaver. It acts as a dynamic counterweight. If the monkey slips to the left, it throws its heavy tail to the right to snap its center of gravity back to the middle of the branch. It is a biological tightrope walker's pole, but over millions of years, apes got bigger. They got heavier. Running on top of flimsy branches became a death trap. So, our ape ancestors completely revolutionized how they moved. They shifted to suspensory locomotion. Instead of running on top of the branches, they started hanging and swinging underneath them, using their long, powerful arms. You still see this today when a gibbon swings through the canopy or a chimpanzee knuckle walks. The absolute second you transition from balancing on top of a branch to swinging underneath it like a pendulum, a tail goes from being a safety harness to being completely useless, biomechanical dead weight. When a trait stops earning its keep, evolutionary pressure stops protecting it. Because the tail was no longer necessary for survival, that random jumping gene mutation had room to spread through the ape population unchecked. Our ancestors essentially dropped their balancing poles so they could swing freely through the forest. And the tail never fully disappeared. Every single human embryo still faithfully executes that ancient blueprint for a few brief weeks. You grow a tail, but before you are born, programmed cell death kicks in. Your body breaks that tail down, folds it up, and fuses it into your coccyx. It was a random mutation in a shared ancestor, tens of millions of years before humans existed, that got passed all the way down to you. One small, unfinished tail, dismantled from the inside out, sitting right at the base of your spine. But sometimes, the biological demolition crew falls asleep on the job. Because the genetic blueprint for a tail is still physically sitting inside your DNA, the system occasionally glitches. In incredibly rare, highly documented medical cases, the programmed cellular death fails to complete, and a human baby is actually born with a visible tail. In medicine, this is called a true human tail or a vestigial tail. These aren't just bumps on the skin. They are genuine physical appendages covered in skin, packed with blood vessels, nerves, and muscle tissue. They can be up to 5 or 6 inches long. Because they have active muscle fibers connected to the nervous system, some of them can actually twitch and move their tails when they cry or cough. The only difference between these rare human tails and a monkey's tail is that the human version doesn't contain any bone. The vertebrae still fuse at the base of the spine, leaving the external tail as a soft tissue appendage that surgeons usually quickly and safely remove after birth. Biologists call this an atavism. An atavism happens when an ancient, dormant genetic trait suddenly switches back on after millions of years. It is the ultimate, undeniable physical proof that you are walking around with an ancient primate's biological software quietly running in the background of your genome. So, if the tail is completely gone in 99.9% of humans, why did evolution leave the coccyx? Why didn't natural selection just delete the entire structure, smooth out the bottom of the spine, and be done with it? When those ancient apes lost their tails and started hanging from branches, and then millions of years later, when our human ancestors dropped down to the savanna and stood straight up, our bodies faced a massive gravitational crisis. When a dog or a monkey walks on four legs, its internal organs, the stomach, the intestines, the bladder, hang comfortably from the horizontal spine like a hammock. Gravity pulls them straight down toward the ground, and the strong muscles of the stomach wall hold them in place. But the absolute second you stand straight up on two legs, gravity pulls all of those heavy, wet internal organs straight down toward your pelvis. Without a physical floor to catch them, your organs would literally prolapse and fall right out of the bottom of your torso. Evolution needed to build a biological floor, and it needed to build it fast. So, it looked at the useless leftover stump of the amputated tail, the coccyx, and completely repurposed it. Evolution wove a massive, incredibly strong web of ligaments and muscles directly into that bone. This web is called the pelvic floor. Your coccyx is the literal load-bearing anchor point that catches the weight of your entire digestive tract every time you jump, run, or sneeze. But it did one more thing. Without the leftover stump of your ancient tail, you couldn't stand upright. You couldn't control your bodily functions, and you couldn't sprint across the savanna. Natural selection is a ruthless machine, but it is also the ultimate architect. It took a catastrophic genetic mutation that amputated our tails, and it used the leftover wreckage to build the foundation of the human body.